Hello and welcome to the June edition of Lunchtime Learning. I can't believe we've been doing this now for 6 months. It was a goal that I set at the beginning of the year for Entropia to do monthly lunchtime learnings. And true to my goal and meeting my goal and metrics, I've been able to do one every third Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern on a particular topic of professional development. We've talked about goal setting. We've talked about negotiations. We've talked about networking. What else have we talked about? The things that we talked about this semester. I can't really remember this quarter, but we've done six. And that brings us to today's lunchtime learning. And I always have to check 1 second to make sure that I am actually live. It tells me that I'm live here, but it doesn't tell me that I'm live on another platform. So I always try to wait to make sure. I see that I have a couple of people in already, so I will keep going because one person is in the room at least. Two people. Very good. Great. So, lunchtime learning today, we talk about informational interviewing. What is informational interviewing? What's the purpose? And just want to give you a couple of tips. Now, I will say this is lunch, and as things happen, people sometimes have to cancel their lunch plans or change their lunch plans. So, our original intent was to have someone on live so that we would view and do a mock informational interview, but unfortunately, plans changed and my interviewee was not able to attend today. So we'll try to figure out how we can fit that in a little bit later and have a mock informational interview. But for now, for those of you that are joining live, you can see this. For those of you that are joining on replay, just want to tell you a little bit about Entropia Consulting. You can contact me directly, mqualls at entropiaconsulting.com. You can visit the website. You can contact me via phone 202-455-0426. If I'm not able to answer, please do leave a message and I will return your call. I am really trying to build and take advantage of Twitter and reaching out to the audience on Twitter. So if you are on Twitter, please follow me at Dr. Qualls and tell a friend to follow. Tell your followers to follow Dr. Qualls. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Now, speaking of LinkedIn, it's very appropriate that we talk about LinkedIn as we're talking about informational interviewing. So, what exactly is an informational interview? There are several, what do I say? I wouldn't say several definitions, but I think that there's several different interpretations. That's a good one. There's several different interpretations as to what an informational interview is. And for the purposes of our lunchtime learning and our discussion today, let's take informational interview as just that. It's something where you are trying to find out information, fact finding. So think of yourself, if you will, as an investigative reporter looking for information. One of the fallacies that I've seen from my students or some of my clients that have tried to conduct informational interviews is they go into it thinking that or taking the informational interview as something of a job interview. And that's not what the informational interview is all about. The informational interview is an opportunity for you to learn about the position of the person that you're interviewing. It's an opportunity for you to learn about the company and the culture. It's an opportunity for you to learn any and everything that you can from that person's perspective about that role. Now, that brings in another point where it's just one person's perspective on that role or that position or that company's culture. So, as you are planning out your strategy, why are you even doing informational interviews? You want to keep that in consideration. And there may be times where you have to interview two or three people at the same company or the same types of roles that you think you may be interested in. So, where do you start? So now that we kind of have an understanding of what the informational interview is, where do you start or how do you start? Well, first and foremost, you have to really think about, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Why do I want to reach out? Now, ultimately, for most people, the informational interview is about getting a job. It is about using it as a tool or a strategy to get you in the door, if you will. So that being the case, You do want to be thoughtful or strategic about the people in which you're interviewing. Do you have to know the people that you're interviewing for the informational interview? Not at all. And in many cases, and in most cases, you won't know them. You will not have had a personal relationship with that person. Now, someone may have referred you to them to interview, but you don't have to necessarily know them. So, the first thing that I would say do when you're preparing for your informational interview is think about what it is that you want to learn about. What are the positions that you want to learn about? What are the positions that you're interested? Think about titles. One of the things, particularly for graduate students or new hires, people that are new on the job market or transitioning, we get caught up a bit into the job title. And in many times, the job title does not reflect the job responsibility. We may think that there's something that we want to do, but oh, it only says that this person is a project manager. Well, hey, how many of you have ever interviewed a project manager to see what are the roles and responsibilities of the project manager? For many people, project management is really good and it suits them well because not only does it take a lot of organizational skills, but it also takes a lot of people and relationship skills because you're managing projects, but you're also managing people and managing and being a liaison for getting information for that project to run. So you're able to see and you're able to interact with a broad range of people, not just managing a project. There are several different skill sets that you have to have when you want to be a project manager. And I just use project management as one example, but just kind of think about all of the opportunities or all of the responsibilities or all of the day-to-day routines that you may miss by just thinking, oh no, project management, that's not for me. But when you interview someone, you find out the information. What do they do? What are the skills that they use day in or day out for the informational interview? That brings us to a second point. When we're talking about the interview or preparing for the informational interview, keep the interview about the person. It's not about you. They aren't interviewing you, you're interviewing them. And as tempting as it may be to try to, get the inside scoop, well, where would I fit in this organization? Or talking about yourself and saying, oh, I have this skill. How would I fit in here? There's a way to get that information without directly saying, well, in this particular organization, or where would my skills fit here? Because remember, it's an informational interview. You're trying to understand their perspective. So rather than saying, where would I fit in, or how would my skills fit in here, perhaps you could say something to the person you're interviewing to say, I noticed that it does take a lot of organization, or it does take a lot of time management type skills. How are those skills utilized to conduct your job, or how do you utilize those things? Or perhaps you can ask them, what are the most important skills required to do your job? It's simple enough. Just always keep in mind you want to know about them. You want to know about their perspective. You want to know about what's required of them, what's the expectations for the company. And then you'll be able to see, is this really a fit for me? Is this where I fit in this particular type of organization? Keep the focus on the person and their experiences. Here's another thing, another caution for people when you're preparing for an informational interview. Hmm. Interview, you automatically think, oh, I really need to prepare. I need to do as much research as I can about this person and where they're from and their background and their company. I always have, you can go into an informational interview knowing as little as possible because that's when you will learn the most. It's human nature. If we've done the research, we think that we know everything that there is already about the position, and there's no real room or opportunity for learning because we've done all the research and we've scratched out all of the questions that we would typically ask because we say, oh no, I looked it up online, I know that. I encourage you to go into the informational interview almost like a blank sheet of paper. Now, granted, you do want to have a basic set of questions that you want to ask to guide the conversation, but that's all that it should be. Guide the conversation. Let the interviewee take control of the flow of the conversation. You started off and being clear about what your intent is, what you're trying to learn, ask a few questions, but then listen. Spend the majority of your time in this interview listening and learning. Be clear on what you want to get out of the informational interview. It's quite okay. It's quite fine to say, hey, I'm on the job market. I'm evaluating a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of roles out here that I just don't know about, and I don't know where potentially, I could fit. So I'm really taking some time to learn about different companies, different organizations, different roles. And I appreciate you taking the time talking to me about your experience. And leave it at that. So you're clear up front. It's not saying that, hey, can you get me a job? But what you are saying is that you're open to learning about the opportunities available at a particular company from their perspective. Let's see. I wrote down a couple of tips, so I'm just trying to stay on point and on task here. Be mindful and respectful of the time, right? So informational interviews should not take long. It shouldn't be one of those things where you block off someone's calendar for an hour unless they are the one that initiates or say, hey, yeah, let's do an hour. Typically, 15 to 30 minutes is all it will take for an informational interview because that person is giving up their time to talk to you and to share with you and give you information. It doesn't take an hour for an informational interview. There may be some follow on, but for the most part, 30 minutes tops. Now, I say that if the conversation goes over, let it be on the interviewees, not you, the interviewer. Let it be on their part where they extend the interview or talk a bit more. Again, prepare your questions, and that's going to be a part of making sure that your 30 minutes is well utilized. Give leading questions where you really allow the person to speak about their experiences and what they do. I would stay away from the cliche or typical questions of, hey, can you tell me what's a typical day like in your job? Well, for most people, there really is no typical day. We do different things day in or day out. And so that generic or really broad type of question of asking, hey, what's a typical day like for you, will not get us far. It wouldn't be very effective. Rather than saying what's a typical day like for you, you could even make it more specific and say, hey, can you tell me what did you do this morning when you came in? And that will get the person starting to talk about their day. And if it's something that is routine, then it allows them to say, well, this is something that I do on a daily basis. Or then it allows them to say, well, nothing is the same for me on a day to day basis. Today was one of those days where I had mostly meetings. And as a follow on to that, you may be interested in what kind of meetings do they have? Are they on site? Are they on the computer? How do they balance and manage the time? Remember, it's all about them. And the more questions that you can ask about them and their perspective, typically the more information, the more they're willing to share. And you'll glean a lot from that. It does take practice. It takes a lot of practice to get really good at having effective informational interviews where both you and the interviewee are comfortable. Start out by, how do you start? How do you find your first informational interview candidate? Well, once you've identified the types of things, the types of jobs, the types of positions or the companies that you're interested in, go to your network and say, hey, do you know anyone who works at company XYZ? Or, hey, do you know anyone who is a project manager or a financial analyst? If they say yes, then your next line of question would be, would you mind introducing me to them or making a connection because I'd like to conduct an informational interview? If they say yes, they make the connection, then you send an email or a phone call or however it is that you were introduced to follow up and say thank you for agreeing to have an informational interview with me. I'd like to book about 30 minutes for us to sit down and chat about your role as a project manager at XYZ company. Be very clear, be very specific, particularly when you're setting up the invite, because again, be respectful and mindful of the person's time. Person to person, they are the best. in my opinion, for informational interviews. If you can get a person-to-person interview, it would be great because networking is relational. You are building relationships. You see people, and it's a lot easier to form the relationship when you can visualize them. You know, the nonverbal body language, the nonverbal communication is important. So face to face would be my number one, but I do realize that it's not always possible to have a face to face informational interview. So your next option could be perhaps Skype or Zoom or some other type of video teleconferencing if you are able to do so. And then if you're not able to do that, then we always have the standard mobile teleconferences, which are fine. But just make sure that if you are in the same city or if they are amenable to having a video teleconferences, try those options first. Then you can do the phone conference if neither one of those two options are available. I talked about your network. If you have a personal network for these people, well, what happens if no one in your personal network or anyone that you know that you can pick up the phone or call or email directly and say, hey, do you know someone? There's always LinkedIn, there's Twitter, any of your social media professional contacts. You can do a call or reach out for them. I like to use LinkedIn because there are people on there, and you know, people are on LinkedIn. If they didn't want to be connected or linked to, they wouldn't be on LinkedIn. That's the other thing to keep in mind about informational type interview. If they're on LinkedIn, then you're already standing a really good chance that they will be willing to have an informational interview with you. So you scroll through LinkedIn, you can do a quick search of either job titles or companies, and then you'll see people that are in LinkedIn that are also within your network, whether they be first, second, or third degree. You find someone that you're interested in or someone who looks interesting. If they were first degree connection, then you do the same as you did with the previous. Send them an invite asking about 30 minutes or so of their time to conduct an interview on their position at XYZ. If it's a second or third degree connection, I always advise on trying to get the person who's connected to them, your common connection. I always advise having someone make the connect. A couple of reasons for that. The main reason is people are busy. People do get a lot of random, people do get a lot of random connects, random requests for meetings, people looking for jobs. And so you just kind of have to sift through all of that. If you have a direct connection, people are more willing to respond quicker and be more willing to accept the invitation and put you on your calendar sooner rather than later for the informational interview. So if you have second or third degree connections, go ahead and reach out to the common connection, ask for an introduction, and then proceed with the same steps in setting up the informational interview. Let's see, what else do I have here? You're preparing your questions, you're being respectful and mindful of your times. You're not spending too much time doing background information so that you have educated yourself enough where you feel as though you know everything and there's no longer a need to talk. You're keeping the focus on the person that you're interviewing and not just on yourself. That is, I mean, if I can't emphasize or stress anything enough, it is just that. You want to make sure that the focus of the interview is on them, that you're trying to gain or glean information. That will allow, you know, a couple of things can happen. You're trying to get information, but the person that you're talking to, when they realize that it's not just about you trying to get a job, if that was your intent, that you really are trying to get information, then they will typically be more willing to share other resources with you. And so that brings another point about the informational interview. Even as you're closing out, there may be an opportunity for you to say, you know, if there are other people who you would like or who you think would be a good fit for me to chat with about a role here, either within your company or within another company, anyone that may be in professional societies or any of their colleagues, you can always ask if they don't volunteer. Just, you know, you'll have a feel for how this informational interview is going, and you will know whether it's okay to ask for more or if you should just say, oh, you know what, maybe we should just kind of end it here type of thing. But You always want to leave an impression with the person in which you have interviewed so that they will remember you. You know, it may not be that there's an opportunity available at that company right now, but as they have interacted with you, people can pick up on your skill set. People can pick up on a lot about you. Even if you don't tell them much about you, they can learn about you from the questions that you ask. So that's why it's important to really spend some time thinking about, the questions that you are asking the interviewer, because it gives a person an idea about where you are, where your mindset is, the types of things that you're asking and wondering about. So, what are the advantages of the informational interview? It allows you to see in a more relaxed and informal manner. Number one, the fit of an organization. And you hear a lot of people talk about fit. If you are new to a role, new to the job market, and you've heard people talk about fit, when you do an informational interview, pay attention to how that person speaks about their role. Now, you don't expect anyone to badmouth their job. You don't expect anyone to say, oh, this is the worst place. I wouldn't advise anyone to work here. If they say that, then that does raise a couple of red flags, but continue on with the interview and learn more about why. And it could be that that person was not a good fit for that role or that organization, but that also will give you information more about the importance of fit. Do you fit in culturally? Do you fit in, just technically? Is this a good fit for your skill set, for the things that you like to do? Fit is important. And that's one of the key advantages that you can take away from informational interview. And you learn about the company in an informal manner. And even if you were thinking about going forward with a formal application for a job, that informational interview could save you the stress and the strain of going through the interview process and the application and then getting to a place that's just not a fit for you. Another question was, what do you do if someone tells you no or rejects your invitation? Hey, that's life. Not everyone will be able to accommodate your request for an informational interview. Don't take it personally. Thank them for their time. They didn't even have to write you back, but the mere fact that they wrote you back was, it's kind of kind on their part. But thank them for taking the time to respond and letting you know that they won't be available at this time. But always leave the door open. Say, if at a later time you do find that your calendar frees up, I'd be more than happy to reschedule or to get with you at that time. But don't be discouraged because one person tells you no. There are tons of people out there. If you're on LinkedIn or Twitter, especially, there are plenty of people out there who can do what it is that you need and provide you an informational interview. In fact, you need multiple interviews. Don't just limit yourself to one. Now, we talked a lot about informational interviewing for people that are on the current job search. Informational interviews are also used for people like me who not necessarily on the job market, but always wanting to understand or learn more about different jobs, either for myself, for later in life, or for my clients. And really just to kind of keep up with the changing pace of what's going on in the workplace. What are people looking for? What are some of the responsibilities? What are some of your needs? It's beneficial for everyone. It's not always just about getting a job. Sometimes it really is about networking and building your network from the informational interviews for later dates. It may be that they may need you and they just don't know it just yet. But just by interacting and talking with each other, speaking with each other, it builds relationships. And that's another advantage of the informational interview. One is fact finding, learning about the job, learning about the responsibilities, learning about the company, allowing you to have a informal insight into the fit or the cultural fit, if you will, of the organization. So that's about it. The whole informational interview. We have come to almost an end of our lunchtime learning today, and just kind of doing a quick recap. Informational interviewing, we talked about what it was. Informational interviewing is about learning about the organization, learning about the position from insight one-on-one, not something that you've learned from the website, not something that you've learned from reading, but you're getting it from the horse's mouth, if you will, direct contact from the person. How do you prepare for an informational interview? Be an open canvas, be a blank slate, if you will. Try not to do too much information so that you have psyched yourself out that you know everything and there's nothing else that you can ask this person about the role or responsibility. Let the conversation be as free flowing as possible. Keep the conversation focused on them. Keep the conversation focused on the interviewee, not you, the interviewer. They don't want to learn about you. You're trying to learn about them. Be clear about what it is that you want up front, that you really are trying to learn about a particular position. Let's see, and we have a couple of other things. Be respectful and mindful of their time. If you have an informational interview, whether it's in person, whether it's via video conference or phone, make sure that you are on time. Be respectful and mindful of their time. Use your network. Use your personal network, use your social media networks, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, to find people of interest and reach out to them. And finally, the most important thing to do, and this is our ending point here, is when you finish the interview in person, thank them for taking the time to meet with you, having coffee, lunch, dinner, whatever it may be. Thank them for taking the time and sharing the information with you. But then you also do a follow-up email and thanking them for taking the time, because they didn't have to. Time is a valuable commodity. And the more that people are willing to share with you, the more that they take time out to share with you, that's what's going to help you in your job search or in your career search, if you will, if you're not looking for a particular job at the moment. But that's informational interviewing. I thank you for joining me for lunchtime learning. It seems like the time just really flew by, but hopefully you've gleaned something that will be helpful in applying to your next informational interview. And I look forward to the second half of 2016 and the lunchtime learnings. We're going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to try a couple of different platforms and we'll see how it works. So look forward to meeting with you next month in July. And I will have the schedule of subjects or topics for July, August, and September out within the next week. So if you're listening to this and you have ideas, if you have topics or things that you want to hear about, shoot me an email. I'll put my contact information back up. If you have things that you would like to talk about, shoot me an email, send me a tweet, or give me a call of what you want to talk about during lunchtime learnings. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.